Welcome to the Menopause and Cancer podcast, where we speak with cancer survivors, patients, and incredible experts in their fields to help us find solutions to our symptoms and ideas to improve our health. My name is Danny Binnington, and you've got to listen to this conversation about how your breathing might impact your menopausal symptoms during the day. This is going to be such a great conversation, and I'm delighted to bring to you Dr. Louise Oliver. She's a GP with decades of experience, and she's also become a functional breathing practitioner and life coach after she became a snorer during her peri-menopause. She got elbowed into the side, and she's gone on a real quest to understand what is functional breathing, what is non-functional breathing, and how does our breathing when we're asleep impact how we're feeling when we're awake, and how, in essence, has this got an effect on our menopausal symptoms, or what we believe these are symptoms of our lack of estrogen, for example. Our whole body is such an incredible sort of machine, and everything is so interlinked, and we're going to talk about that today. This is a really action-packed episode. We're going to be learning about where to put your tongue in your mouth. How can you train yourself to breathe better when you're asleep during the day? There is so much going on in this conversation. And we're also going to be talking about trauma. How does our breath change when we have life-changing events? Like all of you listening here would have been told at one point, you've got cancer. That might have changed your breathing. This shock, this fight or flight situation will change how we're breathing. And in some cases, the breathing doesn't always recover. There's lots and lots to unpack, lots of useful and practical tips in this conversation. So get pen and paper out, and let's bring Dr. Louise Oliver into this conversation. Oh, and just before I do bring Louise onto the show, make sure you stay to the end, where I guide you through a few minutes of a really lovely awareness breathing practice. It's a really simple one for you to do, and I really hope it's going to just bring everything together from this conversation and give you a few practical tips as how and where to start to notice and acknowledge your breathing. So stay till the end. Louise, welcome to today's episode. How are you today?
I'm good, and I'm really excited that we're going to have this conversation.
In the pre-conversations to recording today, we spoke about so much, and I didn't just walk away thinking, if I do what Louise says, I'll have no more double chin, but that stuck with me, Louise. I know we're going to talk about a lot more. Okay, Louise, let's dive in. We really want to talk about our breath and how not breathing properly has a negative impact on our whole body and also our menopausal symptoms. And you're really passionate about that. Talk me through a little bit about what you've learned, because you weren't always a functional breathing expert, were you? You're a GP, you've got decades of experience. What happened?
So essentially, I hit my perimenopause and I started snoring, and it massively impacted my sleep. And we know that, sleep is what we need to repair and recover our body. When we're asleep, our body should go into a relaxation response and be able to repair, recover, and our inflammation should help get our inflammation down. But unfortunately, if we don't breathe well when we're asleep, so that's sleeping with the mouth open, snoring, or breath holding while sleeping, it negatively impacts our body. And I recognized I wasn't breathing correctly. I corrected how I breathe, and now I breathe with my mouth closed, silently, and I feel refreshed on wakening, and I feel calmer, and I can exercise with greater ease. So essentially, I now work half-time as a GP, but half-time as a breathing practitioner, trying to help others gain from what I've learned.
Wow, and you're really passionate about this, aren't you? Because I saw you on a live with Davina McCall, who was really sort of intrigued as well. I've met you at a workshop in Oxfordshire, amongst other amazing menopause specialists, and everyone you speak to always goes, oh my gosh, I had no idea. And I had no idea. Do people know about how our breathing, especially when we sleep, impacts our everyday life? Or is this very new sort of research coming out?
So essentially, it's been known about for a very, very long time. So sleep medicine is a part of a specialty of medicine that looks at how we sleep. and the father of sleep medicine, Dr. Guilleminault, I'm hoping I'm pronouncing his name correctly, over at least 22 years ago, he released a paper that described how women breathe differently post-menopause compared to pre-menopause. So this is not new. Every time I go to a lecture in sleep medicine, when they talk about risk factors for obstructive sleep apnea, so that's when people stop breathing during sleep, they always mention menopause as a risk factor, but we're not talking about it. And I don't think we talk about the importance of sleep, and we talk about the amount of sleep, and I completely agree in all the sleep hygiene advice, but I believe personally there should be another question on that sleep hygiene. Consider how you breathe when you're asleep, because if you breathe well and efficiently when you're asleep, your sleep quality and your body's ability to repair and recover is so much better than if you're not breathing well when you're asleep. And it makes complete sense. When I talk to people, it's just they've not considered it.
Let me interrupt this conversation really briefly. I want to say a huge thank you to our sponsors, Made for Life Organics, the most amazing skincare brand who are sponsoring today's episode. They have got so much integrity and I love everything about them, and their products are amazing. A few weeks ago, I had Amanda on the podcast. We talked about organic ingredients. And did you know, to be called an organic skincare product, the product only needs to contain less than 2% of organic ingredients? Like, how does our government think that is okay? How can they sell us products like that? Well, Amanda, the founder of the fantastic skincare brand Made for Life Organics, thinks the same. She thinks that's crazy, and she's a real rebel and a disruptor in the skincare and the spa industry. They hand blend their products all in Cornwall. She invites you in to go and visit their studio. It's amazing what they do. They combine science with nature, and they bottle everything up in Cornwall. And if you want a true organic skincare product that is good for your skin, that brings nature into the skincare, into your home, into your routine, then they've also given us a discount, which I'm very, very grateful I can pass on to you. Go to their website, madeforlifeorganics.com, and at checkout, you can use the code MENO20 and it gives you 20% off. So madeforlifeorganics.com, and at checkout, MENO in capital letters 2020, and it'll give you 20% off. Go and check them out. Okay, so what happened with you personally? I don't know, if you co-sleep with someone, a partner or a child in your house, did they suddenly say, oh my gosh, Louise, turn over, you're sleeping? Because I wonder, it's a bit funny, isn't it? Like, I wonder how many people at home are listening to this thinking, oh gosh, I sleep, or my partner sleeps, snores, for example. And it's a little bit funny and it's a bit embarrassing and it's a bit like maybe annoying, and people maybe go into separate bedrooms, but we don't really maybe consider it as a risk factor to other things like our perimenopause or menopause symptoms. So what happened with you at home?
Completely. So essentially, you get elbowed. So, my husband next to me, obviously I'm being noisy, I'm disturbing his sleep. So then, you get prodded by the elbow to get into a position where it's less noisy. And then obviously you get to a position where I'm too noisy, and then we're in separate beds. So, and I hear terrible stories. And unfortunately, a lot of people, as you say, laugh. And I know the impact on their body. I hear terrible stories of my friends won't go away with me for a weekend now, or I have to buy a separate hotel room. I'm rattling walls. My partner can never sleep next to me. And people think it's a bit of a joke, and it's not. When you look at the impact, when we're asleep, our relaxation response should kick in, and our fight-flight response should turn down. And that's then so that the body feels safe, the body feels content, and the body then can do all the wonderful repair processes. But if we are noisy or breath hold when we're asleep, essentially our body feels threatened, so it keeps the fight-flight system up, so it keeps that adrenaline up, and the body's is sort of sidetracked thinking about breathing and maintaining breathing rather than controlling all the processes that are to do with repairing the body. So yeah, and obviously people who live on their own may not know how they breathe, but obviously if they go and have time away with others, that might be an insight into it. If they wake up choking during sleep, so they feel that they're choking, that could be sometimes an indication. Another indication may be if somebody is, maybe had quite a long time in bed, maybe 8-9 hours in bed, but they're waking up still feeling unrefreshed, or their sleep's fragmented, or they're waking up with a headache. They're getting up frequent to pass urine. They're waking up with a stuffy nose. They're waking up coughing or wheezing. All these things can suggest you're not breathing well at night.
Wow, because so many of those things are definitely part of so many people's reality. And we know that over 70% of cancer survivors will struggle with ongoing sleep issues, even 1 or 2 years after their active cancer treatment finished. So that's a problem. We know people's bladders are weaker, right, as they go into menopause. We know a lot of people in our community can't have their estrogen back. They might have their local estrogen back, but systemic HRT is contraindicated for so many people in our community. And so there are lots of facets of why sleep might be disturbed. Of course, so it's the hormone levels that are maybe lacking, or it could be the entire stress and trauma we've been through. And we might be waiting for scans, and looking into the future might be filled with uncertainty. And we know that impacts sleep negatively. And for those that are lucky enough to then sleep 8 hours, perhaps, in an ideal world, and if we're not rested when we awake, it could mean that we're keeping ourselves sort of alert, right? Is that what you're saying? So we're almost disturbing ourselves. So actually, snoring isn't just bad for someone you co-sleep with, your partner.
Correct.
It's also really not great for yourself. So it actually does impact our partners a lot more. So if you're elbowed, you've got a right reason to be elbowed, right? So it's not great for whoever you're sleeping with or yourself.
Completely. Because essentially, our body associates sort of noise as a potential threat. So whether that noise is coming from you or your partner, your body's thinking, oh, is there a lion in the room? And it's just you or your partner making noise, but it keeps that fight flight system going. And also, if you think about it, we're only breathing this tube that we're breathing through here. It's only about the size of a thumb, and it's collapsible. So it can, it's not rigid. So there's parts of it that are rigid, but so it can narrow. And what I would say to, I'm not telling anybody how they're breathing when they're asleep. I'm just saying consider it. So, for example, if you are waking up with nightmares, anxiety, palpitations, breathless, choking, all those things, just consider, could it have been that at that moment my tube here in my throat got a little bit narrower, then my body felt a threat to life, and then it had to generate a fight flight response to open that airway to allow me to breathe. And the most risky part of sleep for that to happen is when we go into the deep sleep. So particularly when our muscles are quite floppy, that would be the chance where it would be more likely to happen. And unfortunately, that part of sleep is where our brain actually does a bit of a dishwasher system. So there's something called the lymphatic system. So it's like it's only been discovered in the last 10 years or so. But when we go into deep sleep, this dishwasher brain waste removal system should turn on. But unfortunately, if we keep generating adrenaline and keep taking us out of that deep sleep, we're not performing that system as well. And I have to say, my brain fog that I experienced is so much better now. I sleep better, I presume, because my brain's detoxifying itself better than it was when I was snoring.
Wow, so we have a detoxification process in the brain like we have in the body. Because I remember after my active cancer treatment for years. And I kid you not, for years, I was drinking very bitter liver tea. And you can buy these teas in the pharmacy in Austria. You know, I'm Austrian. And you can buy very, very bitter. Like most people, I don't think could stomach that tea, but I built up to it because I was thinking I need to get rid of all of the toxins that have been put into my body, you know, whether it ever made any difference, but it did me mentally. It was really good for me because I thought I was doing something. I had no idea. And obviously we know that breathing is detoxifying, like I say it in yoga, but I didn't know that you had this detoxifying process in your brain as well. Yeah.
I mean, the body, I mean, you'll know this from yoga, the body is so interconnected and so beautifully finely tuned. You know, we've been developed over many, many, many years. And if we breathe as nature intended, we have a wonderful system that helps detoxify our body and our brain. It's just in modern day society, we're not necessarily breathing as we've been biologically programmed to breathe. But if we just think about, so we've got two systems, two waste removal systems. So one in the brain and one in our body. So the one in our body is called the lymphatic system. So if people have, you know, talk about lymph nodes being raised, people in the cancer community will probably be aware of lymph nodes. And the lymph nodes are all part of the lymphatic system, which is that waste removal system in our body. And the lymphatic system doesn't have a heart. So the pump that helps pump that lymphatic fluid around is actually our diaphragm. So that's that main breathing muscle that sits under our lungs. And if we breathe with our diaphragm, and we always get better movement of our diaphragm if we are nasal breathing, when we breathe with the muscle at the bottom of our lungs, our diaphragm, we create pressure changes in our chest, which then help pump. It creates pressure changes in our chest and our abdominal and pelvic cavity, and that helps move that lymphatic system around. And again, when we're asleep, the data I've read, there needs to be a lot more research on the lymphatic systems. This is now the waste removal system of the brain. There needs to be a lot more research on that, but it seems to be the pressure changes that seem to help move that fluid around. And again, the diaphragm is very important for that. And we always get more movement of the diaphragm when we're nasal breathing. And we all came into this world as a baby that could only nasal breathe. So I would say to people, just observe yourself over the next week or two. When you're resting, moving and sleeping, consider whether you are breathing in and out of your nose. Obviously, it's difficult when you're asleep, but you can think as soon as you wake up, is my mouth open or closed? If you have got a sleeping partner and they get up to go to the toilet, they could have a look whether your mouth is open or closed. If you're waking up with a congested nose or a very dry mouth, you've probably been mouth breathing while you're asleep.
This is all just so fascinating. And I love it so much because obviously in yoga, we talk about some poses being detoxifying. And I think sometimes people just look at me and they think, oh, that's rubbish. You know, how can this be? I am detoxifying by eating lots of greens or by having celery juice and all of those things. It's what we believe in, isn't it? What have you bought in to believe? Who has influenced you? But hearing you talk about how our breathing and that movement of the belly, and you know, most of my days speaking to you now, my breathing is very much in my chest. And I probably log on after this and write my show notes, you know, the little notes that go underneath a YouTube video or the video. And I probably very much hold my breath up there, like tapping away on my keyboard. And only when I remind myself to sort of bring my hand on my belly, do my hands even move? A lot of times they don't, because I'm breathing in my nose. I feel it in my sinuses, in my chest. There's no movement in my belly. And only after a few moments or a few minutes do my hands sort of start moving. So my fingers start pulling apart as I breathe in, because my belly is expanding on the in-breath and then it's releasing on the exhale. And I wonder if people can try that. I mean, I know a lot of people listen to our conversations washing up, so this might be an inconvenience, but if you're sat at your desk or even in your car, you could put one hand on your belly and just see if there is movement. And understanding now that movement of the diaphragm really moves our lymphatic system is powerful, isn't it? Because we can do that most most days, anytime, anywhere. And it's a powerful way of bringing detoxification processes into our body, or encourage them to work for us rather than become sluggish, I guess.
Oh, definitely. And I think certainly talking a lot, definitely. I know I don't breathe well when I talk because I get overexcited. And also, when I'm at the surgery, I just have to concentrate on what the person's saying and what I need to do to help that person. So I'm not going to be thinking about my breathing. And that definitely, talking a lot for my living was one of the reasons why I wasn't breathing so well. And women's, I don't know if people know, but women's ribs are hung on the spine differently than men. So men, the rib is hung on sort of did you not know this? So we are sort of slightly primed as females to breathe more upper chest. So the ribs, when they're the ribs are stuck onto the spine, a man, the ribs will be more horizontal, but the women's ribs are fitted sort of slightly on the diagonal, and it's thought that it's thought that they're like that so that when we're pregnant, potentially the ribs can move out of the way to make room for the baby that's growing in the tummy. So we are sort of primed to be a bit more upper chest breathers than men, but our breathing's not as efficient if we're upper chest breathing. So definitely bring your attention back to your breathing. I would always say, like, when you get in the periods of time where you can't do a lot else. So, when you're filling maybe getting a glass of water, going to the toilet, that could just be the moment where you just think, right, am I nasal breathing? Am I moving my diaphragm? And also, is my tongue in the correct position? Because that also helps. So I don't know if this is a good time to tell people how to make sure their tongue's in the correct position.
We will definitely. I would want to talk about all of that. But before then, take me back a little bit. You got elbowed. You were waking up with brain fog. You were waking up sluggish. You'd been a women's health GP for a long time. Breathing became part of your learning process. You now say you don't snore anymore. So what did you do and how did you do that? Because that's what I think we all want to know, is putting the tongue in the right position part of it, I suppose. Talk me through what happened and how you taught yourself to breathe properly again.
So I always think, so there's three things I think, sort of, because this can be a really new concept for people, and I'm not being critical in any way. I've been a doctor, I qualified in 1998. I've been a doctor a very, very long time before I realised that how we breathe is important. But essentially, I say sort of aware, assess, and action. So first of all, be aware that just because breathing is generally unconscious and automatic, that doesn't mean it's automatically efficient. And there's this spectrum, so we can breathe efficiently, inefficiently, or anywhere in between. And essentially, I started breathing inefficiently a number of years ago, and it's progressively got worse for various different reasons. And perimenopause was the tipping point, and that's when I started snoring. So just be aware that even if you don't feel breathless, you may not be breathing as efficiently as you think. So that's aware. The next bit is assess. So how can I assess if I'm breathing well? Well, the easiest one is how you breathe when you're asleep, because that is your unconscious breathing pattern. So if you're snoring, you're holding your breath, you've got gaps in breathing when you're asleep, or even just sleeping with your mouth open, you're not breathing as efficiently as you could do. The other aspect is looking at how much mouth breathing you're doing in the day, because the only role the mouth has in breathing is to make it inefficient. We have not been designed to use the mouth to breathe. There is a third way of assessing it, and I'm sure you'll put the link in the show notes. But I've done a video where I use a piece of research data or research paper that looks at comfortable breath hold time, but it's a bit complicated to talk about on here. So I've done a video on YouTube so people can look at that. So that's the assess bit. So first of all, if
we'll link to that.
Working out if you're breathing inefficiently, and then if you work out you are breathing inefficiently, then the next step is, do you want to take some action? So obviously this is, if you're going to try and change your unconscious breathing pattern, this is an active, it's not a passive process. Your going to have to try and make some changes to retrain your body over a period of at least 3 months, because you've got to create nerve connections and muscle memory to make that unconscious, to make the difference at night. It is perfectly possible. The longer you've been breathing inefficiently, the longer it will take. So I've worked with some people who've maybe recognised they're not been breathing efficiently for 50 years. 3 months is going to take longer than that. But you get benefits before that. And you've got to be kind. You have to be patient with yourself. One thing I've learned with breathing is if you push really hard, your body doesn't like it, and it teaches you to be kind and patient with yourself, because it wants you to listen to it. It wants you to work with it. And if you're like, I'm going to tackle this breathing, I'm going to make myself breathe well, your body really doesn't like it. So I think it's been a really great learning tool for me. And people learn lots of things. One of the things when I'm coaching people to breathe well is because breathing is so part of our deepest core, you sometimes recognize things about yourself. And sometimes people, if people have had past trauma and things like that, they may make the link that their breathing sort of changed around that time. So there can be quite an emotional part to it sometimes as well. But I think actually if you work with kindness and patience, there can be a healing as part of that. So but essentially we've got to think of breathing as a tube. So what can we do to keep the tube open? And we've also got to think about how we're bringing the air in and out. So the first aspect of the tube is we want to have the tube as open as possible and as strong as possible. So that involves 24-hour nasal breathing, making sure the tongue's in the correct position, and talking about strengthening the muscles around that airway. And then the other aspect to it is thinking about how much air we're bringing in and out of that tube. So I was significantly over breathing. So I was breathing in excess of the amount of air that my body needed. So there's a whole series of exercises that I did to retrain my body to breathe the volume it needed to breathe. And then I've also strengthened the muscles that are related to bringing the air into my body. And I've also trained my body to breathe more slowly. So it's a combination of all those things. But on this podcast, to give people tips to go forward, the simplest thing is to probably talk about the importance of 24-hour nasal breathing and tongue position, because those are some simple things that we can give listeners.
So basically, it's exercises that I do during the day. It's a bit like my pelvic floor exercises, where some people do them and some people don't. Mm-hmm. And we know that, for example, or meditation, right? Mm-hmm. Meditation doesn't just work in the moment and we're suddenly going to be zen and blissed out. A little bit of meditation every single day has a positive impact on other times in your day as well. So we know the effect lasts in other areas of your life, pelvic floor exercises, and same with this, right? So you're saying I can improve how I'm breathing when I'm asleep by doing the exercises in the day. So the effect of the exercise isn't immediate. It needs to build up. We need to retrain. I mean, I'm a little bit annoyed maybe at this, thinking, well, now I need to train my breathing tube as much as I need to do my pelvic floor exercises. Like, what else do I need to do? This is just a bit rubbish. But I hear from you, it's possible. And I like the idea that healing comes with it, because I know from teaching and having taught many, many people in yoga, sometimes after the practice and after breathing, there is an emotional release. And people always say, Danny, what is it today in Shavasana? The time when you're lying on the mat at the end and you're not doing anything, you're just lying down, and I guide people into meditation. Sometimes there are tears and people say, gosh, what was it? And so there is a release, an emotional release that comes from having done your breath work and your exercises and that calming down, and people don't understand where it's come from. And I can see that by consciously starting to think about your breath, you might start to remember why your breathing has changed in the first place in some cases. I'm sure people go on a little journey. Okay, so I can do stuff during the day, but where does this tongue position need to be? Yeah. So if I'm going to make a conscious effort of maybe thinking, okay, how am I going to breathe after this podcast whilst I'm writing my show notes? Am I breathing through my nose? my mouth is closed. Where's my tongue?
Yeah, exactly. So, and I have to say, I think well, for me, I think that the tongue position has been really powerful, because not only is it training my tongue to be in the correct position and open my airway, but it brings a mindfulness to what I do. There's some other science behind it as well, and but maybe we don't have time to go into that. But essentially, if we think about it, if our mouth is open, so if people open their mouth now, if it's safe to do so, just automatically the tongue is a muscle, and I think it's the only muscle in the body that's attached to a bone at one end. So soon, and the bone that it's attached to is under here, the hyoid bone. So if people are listening, it's underneath the chin, the top of the neck. So essentially, as soon as you open your mouth, your tongue is in the wrong position. It's too low down, and the back of the tongue forms part of the airway. So as soon as you've got the mouth open, you have narrowed your airway. So if people open their mouth and breathe in and listen and feel what happens at the back of the throat. So I'll do it now. So I can hear it's noisy, and I can hear a restriction at the back. And then if we close our mouth but keep the tongue at the bottom of the mouth and then breathe in, I'll do it again. So I can still feel a restriction at the back. But then if people have their lips sealed and put their tongue in the correct position. So the correct position for the tongue is up on the roof of the mouth. So the tongue should be sort of flat on the roof of the mouth, the palate of the mouth. It's a very strong muscle, so we don't want I don't want anyone complaining to me they've got funny shaped teeth. So please make sure the tip of your tongue is on the ridge of tissue that sits above your teeth, because if you jam up your tongue against the back of your teeth, over time they'll probably move. So just have the tip of the tongue on the ridge of tissue above the back of the front teeth. And then make sure your lips are sealed. Now, we don't want to clench, because if we clench, we're generating that fight-flight response. So if you're someone that can have the teeth in light contact and not clench, brilliant. I am not one of those people. If I put my teeth in light contact, I clench. So I have to have a little tiny gap in between my teeth, just to make sure I don't clench. And you can put a tiny bit of suction pressure of your tongue on your roof of your mouth, but not enough to cause a headache or anything. So I'll just say that again. So the tongue flat on the roof of the mouth, tiny bit of suction pressure, tip of the tongue on the ridge of tissue above the back of the front teeth, lips sealed, not clenching. And automatically there, you have opened your airway. So if you now breathe in with the tongue in the correct position, it's not as noisy. So because you have moved, now it will depend on anatomy, and different people have different amount of space at the back of the throat, so we'll all have a different experience with that. But generally, if the tongue's in the correct position, you have opened your airway, and you can train your body to remember the correct tongue position. I have many clients who message me, I can't believe it, I woke up and my tongue was in the correct position today. And it's wonderful when it does that, because you've trained your body to be unconscious and have the tongue in the correct position. So yeah.
Louise, is this what gives me a nice chin rather than a triple chin?
Yeah.
I've currently my saggy skin on my chin. Is this what? Yeah.
Because obviously what you're doing is, if you're lifting up that tongue with a tiny bit of suction pressure, as people do it, if you put your hand underneath your chin and you lift up your tongue, you feel the skin underneath your chin and your jaw lift up, and that's because you've literally pushed your tongue on the roof of the mouth and you've lifted up all the tissues underneath your chin. So I'm definitely less baggy than I was underneath my chin. I'm not saying it's perfect. I'm not aiming for perfection, but it's a nice side effect. And also, when people start doing it, I think my tongue was really weak when I started doing it. I ached underneath my chin and I ached across my cheekbones probably for about 2 weeks when I started practicing this. But what that told me was, my tongue is really floppy and it wasn't strong. So just be kind and be patient with yourself as you're doing it.
What if someone is trying this as we speak, and they had a little go as you were sort of demonstrating this, and they think, actually, I can't get enough air in through my nose? I know I've got friends who say that their nasal passages are really quite maybe continuously congested, or they're always feeling like they can't breathe properly through their nose. What do you do in that case? Surely that's quite a horrible feeling then, isn't it?
Yeah. So what I would say to those people is get a timer, set it for 3 minutes, close your mouth and just check you can breathe in and out of your nose for 3 minutes with your lips sealed. If you feel air hunger and you feel a bit suffocated, that's okay. What I'm interested in is, can you actually do it? So can you breathe in and out of your nose for 3 minutes? If you can't, then please go and see your health professional. They need to have a look and see if there's actual physical blockage that's stopping you from breathing through your nose. If you can breathe in and out of your nose for 3 minutes, there was a paper on this, and this matches my clinical experience of coaching others. That is not a physical obstruction. The nose is a use it or lose it organ. Okay, so in the nose, there's vascular tissue that's very similar to what's in the penis and what's in the genitals, basically, and it can swell up with blood, but the opposite can happen. The blood can remove from that, and the tissue can become more open. So the more you don't use your nose, the more your nose becomes blocked. The more you start to use your nose, the more the nose opens up. But there's also this aspect of breathing that we don't talk about enough, which is probably the simplest way to talk about is air hunger. So your friends, say, who are struggling to breathe, let's assume that they can breathe through their nose for 3 minutes, but they have a feeling of suffocation when they're doing it. They feel like they're not getting enough air, or they feel like they need to take a bigger breath in. Often that's to do with something called carbon dioxide tolerance. So we all have a waste product, so we blow out carbon dioxide, that's our waste product, but we have a personal tolerance to that. And when we hit our tolerance to that, we experience air hunger. So we feel that we need to take a bigger breath in, or we're not getting enough air, or we feel suffocated. So if I put say we had a group of people and we all were stood at the bottom of a hill, and I said, right, I want everyone to march up this hill really fast, but I want you to keep your mouth closed. And when you reach that point of air hunger, that feeling of suffocation, or you feel like you have to mouth breathe, just stop. And when you look at when we'd done the exercise and we looked at the hill, we would all be up the hill at different points. So I wouldn't have been able to go very far up the hill initially. And part of the breathing exercise work that I do is about training that carbon dioxide tolerance. And now I do all my running with nasal breathing because I've improved that. And what I have found, there's not enough research on this, unfortunately, because it's a difficult thing to research. But as people's carbon dioxide tolerance improves, and that's in combination with re-establishing 24-hour nasal breathing, a huge amount of nasal congestion improves. And that's based on my clinical experience of working with lots of people.
Wow. So, the things you see or I see on my social media, like the mouth tape, wouldn't that be a really helpful thing to do anyway? So I don't have to practice during the day. I don't have to do this 3 months or 4 months or even longer of reminding myself continuously to breathe through my nose and to put my tongue into the right position. And I just whack on a bit of a mouth tape at night. Same effect, maybe?
So definitely sleeping with the mouth closed is utterly crucial for health and well-being. At the beginning of my journey, I was embarrassed talking about it with people. But I now know the importance, and there's a huge amount of science that we don't have able to go through in this short podcast. But we have been designed to sleep with the mouth closed. If you sleep with your mouth open, you have narrowed your airway, so you have made it more challenging for your body to breathe while you're asleep. But there's lots of other aspects to it as well. But just getting the mouth closed might be enough for some people. But for some people, it can be more challenging. So if you think about it, all we're doing, if we're putting mouth tape on, we're just closing the mouth. We've not changed anything else about our breathing. And if somebody is significantly over breathing, so they're putting huge volumes of air in and out of their body, Some people with asthma might breathe at least double the amount of air that they need if they're not very well controlled, possibly even more than that. And when they close the mouth, if it's a tape that fully goes across the mouth, they may not be able to move the amount of air that their body's primed to use at that moment in and out of their nose. And then you can get something called mouth puffing, which is when the tape's fully across your mouth and your body's trying to breathe it out, but it can't breathe it out through the tape that's closing the mouth. So what I always advise my clients is use a product that goes around the mouth, because then your body can always breathe out of the mouth if it needs to. So the product that, as far as I'm aware, the only product that actually encourages the mouth to close, but you can breathe out, is Myotape. That was designed by the Patrick McEwen, who I did my breathing training with. And essentially it goes around the mouth, you sort of stretch it by 30%, stick it on, and that encourages the mouth to close. But if that person really needed to breathe out through the mouth, it can do. And that's really important, because if someone's significantly over breathing, they need it needs to be more an encouragement to nasal breathe rather than a forced nasal breathe. So that's the product I use. If people want a discount code, there's if you go onto oxygenadvantage.com, there's I've got a discount code of Louise Oliver 5, and they'll get 5% off. And that's what I started off using. And I still tape my mouth closed now, because I want to know that I want to know I've not nasal breathed. I've not mouth breathed at all when I'm asleep, because it's so important. So, but I'd definitely encourage people to use something around the mouth rather than fully, because some people will have obstructive sleep apnea and they don't know. And if you fully tape your mouth, that can lead to mouth puffing. It can actually make the obstructive sleep apnea worse. So we just need to be a little bit careful. But yeah, so important the mouth is closed when we're asleep.
I'm learning so much here, because I'm now thinking, I know one or maybe potentially two of my daughters sleep with their mouth open. They're only teenagers. Like, we're not going to get into this here on this conversation because it's so much to cover, but I'm thinking, I wonder what impact that has on them. They're teenagers and there's lots going on hormonally, but also if that breathing and they're not getting that rest. And I know they're going to bed too late, and I'd love to have them in bed at 8:30, but that's not happening. So, there are those concerns. I'm thinking about my husband, lovely Tim. So there's loads going on here in my thoughts. But going back to you, Louise, I know you're so passionate about this. You want to create bigger change. Like, I know you're a breath coach and you teach people how to breathe, and you are a GP, and you do that even in 10 minutes when people walk into your busy GP practice because you're so passionate about it. But what greater change are you sort of trying to create?
So I'm just going to very briefly just say about your daughters. So nasal breathing and child development is so important. There's basically, I've done a whole blog on it. So what I would say is, if anybody has a connection with a child, whether that be in their personal life or in their professional life, please go on my website. We'll put the link obviously in the show notes. But there's a blog post on there about child development and nasal breathing, and essentially it's really important. So if they read that, so perhaps if you read that, Danny, and hopefully there's enough information in there to know what to do. But yes, so I
thank you.
What I want to do. So what I did, I can't remember when it was. It might have been last year now. Whenever NICE were asking for people to comment on the new updated menopause guidelines, I registered my private company as a stakeholder, and I put a request forward that they link their own NICE obstructive sleep apnea and hypopnea syndrome guidelines to the menopause guidelines, because we know there is a steep rise in sleep disordered breathing as women transition from perimenopause to menopause. This is not new. This has been known for 2 decades in the sleep medicine world. It's just that in the menopause world, we are not talking about it as much as we should do, because there is a hidden epidemic. And whenever I've coached health professionals, they see this, they see it, and they can see it in their patients. And as soon as you start asking patients, you realize this is really, really important. So I've asked them to link the 2 guidelines together, and next month, so in November, we find out whether they have accepted that or not. I'm going to be really disappointed if they don't, because anyway, but we'll see. But I'm hoping that they do link it, and then
Amazing.
that really puts it on the map, because that means every time we talk about sleep with menopause, we should be asking this question. So this is what this, I'm saying this directly from the NICE obstructive sleep apnea hypopnea syndrome guidelines, which state this. So take a sleep history and assess people for obstructive sleep apnea hypopnea syndrome if they have 2 or more of the following features: snoring, witnessed apneas, so that means breath holding while sleeping, unrefreshing sleep, waking headaches, unexplained excessive sleepiness, tiredness or fatigue, waking from sleep to urinate, so to pass urine, choking during sleep, sleep fragmentation or insomnia, and then cognitive dysfunction or memory impairment. So if someone's got 2 or more of those, we need to be talking about how are you breathing when you're asleep, and actually does that person need a sleep study to look for obstructive sleep apnea. But remember, 2 of those questions are snoring, and the other question is witness gaps in breathing when asleep. So we can't answer that question unless we've asked somebody, are they snoring or do they have gaps in sleep? So I'm hoping in the menopause world, if we're saying that people aren't sleeping well, headaches, they're tired, they're waking up to pass urine, they're choking during sleep, they've got poor fragmented sleep, or they've got memory impairment, we need to be asking the question, are you snoring? Do you think you're breath holding or got gaps in breathing when asleep? Because these symptoms can indicate that women potentially are not breathing well when they're asleep. So I'm really hoping they link the 2 guidelines, but we'll see. Fingers crossed.
Louise, good luck, and it's amazing what you're doing. I'm fingers crossed for you as well. I hope you can come back and tell us what's happened, because I think it's so important that we have people that think for us a little bit outside the box, and we make those really vital connections, isn't it? Like, I never want to point fingers to any doctor, because I think every doctor, oncologist, surgeon is amazing here. I just want to raise a little bit awareness of saying, most of your cancer treatments make us menopausal. For most women I speak to, it's awful. They have really bad symptoms, or it has a really bad negative impact on their long-term health. Why aren't you just asking us? Like you are asking, right? You're saying, let's ask women. All I'm saying is let's ask women. The least you can do is ask about their dry vaginas, because we know 87% of all female cancer survivors really struggle with GSM symptoms, and no one is asking. All we're saying, please ask the question, right? Yeah. And it's so important that we're just a little bit outspoken and that we learn. And whatever happens with the guidelines, I really hope people at home are thinking, let's not laugh off anyone snoring. Let's see what we can do about it. And you've given really actionable strategies. I'm definitely going to link to your website. I'm going to read that blog for myself and my children now. And I hope I can link to the tape. So if you give me all of those links, they'll go into the show notes. Thank you so much. I'd love to do maybe another breathing workshop where we get a lot of women on the call. That would be amazing, where we can all see how we're breathing. That would be amazing. I just think it's those small things that we can all do, isn't it, that can have such a transformative impact. And hearing the passion, I have no doubt that you're going to go and make those vital connections for us, be in the guidelines or not. But, fingers crossed.
No, exactly. And it isn't. And, I'm not telling someone they're not breathing well. I'm just saying, consider how you breathe and then assess it and work it out for yourself. And I would love to come back and do another podcast with you, or a workshop, and hopefully we'll be saying, hopefully we'll be talking that the new updated menopause guidelines are linking to the obstructive sleep apnea guidelines. Let's keep all our fingers crossed.
Yes. Yeah, I'm going to put my hands on my belly before I go into the show notes. Do a little bit of like conscious breathing, clean through my lymphatic system. I loved that you reminded me of that as well, Louise. I hope we can get to meet in real person again at one point soon. And thank you so much for your time and your passion and energy. It's been a real pleasure.
And thank you for everything you do, Danny, because I know you're a shining light for lots of people. So well done for everything that you do.
What an incredible conversation. And I really do wish Louise all the best of luck with all of the bigger project she's got going on. I'm going to link to her website here in the show notes. I'm also going to link to the Myotape that Louise recommends. Also going to link to her YouTube and to the blog post about breathing for children, because I think there's lots of interesting information in all of the advice Louise shares. And for you and me, I have promised myself to put my hands on my belly, and I'm going to do so right now, because as I'm speaking to you, I feel my breath up in my chest. I sometimes also feel the tension that I'm holding in my face, in my jaw, around my eyes, even in my eyebrows. And sometimes I can release a lot of that tension with just a few breaths and just a little bit of an awareness of how and where I'm breathing. And so before I'm even going to change my breath, I'm just going to notice with my hands on my belly, lower belly, so around my belly button and lower. I'm going to just sit and notice, where is my breath? Maybe you want to do the same if you're feeling safe and comfortable. Are you breathing through your nose? Are you breathing through your mouth? Is your nose obstructed somehow? Have you got a cold? If you are breathing through your nose, what sounds does it make? Can you feel how the air is going into your sinuses? And which parts of your chest are maybe moving through your in-breath and out-breath? And do you at all feel any movement in your belly? Are your hands moving apart as you breathe in? Or is there very little movement in your lower abdomen? Just noticing, no changing, no judging. Maybe taking a big and deeper breath in, shoulders up to your ears, and a breath out. How does that feel? And you can bring your hands together, just the tips of your fingers, and sort of open your hands a little bit. And every time you breathe in, you open and release the palms away from one another, but the fingertips stay touching. So breathing in, making a sphere with your hands. And breathing out, pressing your palms together. Hands are flat like prayer hands. Breathing in, releasing the palms and tips of your fingers stay together. And exhaling, flattening your hands into prayer hands. And you can carry on here a few times, and the movement of your hands really just visualizes what the breath is doing to you inside of your body. The inhalation is inflating, and the exhalation is releasing. Now, if you transfer that back onto your belly, the inhalation is inflating your belly, and the exhalation is releasing. And with that awareness of how you're breathing and all of the information in the show notes, I'm going to love you and leave you. Can't wait to chat to you on the next podcast episode again. All the best, and I hope today's conversation has been useful to you.